All right, this section of Unit 5, we're going to take a look at China during the Cold War. Okay, now after World War II, we ended up having the Civil War will actually continue again. Remember Chiang Kai-shek, who's going to be the leader of the Nationalist Party or the Kuomintang, and we also had Mao Zedong, who was the leader of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, remember how I told you guys Mao had actually fought back during the war while Chiang Kai shek really tried to avoid the Japanese. As a result of this, we end up seeing Mao emerging as the war hero, and Chiang Kai shek, a lot of people lost respect for him. As a result of that, the communists are actually going to win, and we see the nationalists of the Kuomintang will actually flee to the island of Formosa, which is later going to be named Taiwan. And technically, we have two Chinas for like a year or two until the United Nations actually steps in and says that Communist China is in fact China and Taiwan is actually not China. I know that sounds really weird, but it actually happened. Okay, now looking at China itself, Mao kind of tries to do an organizational aspect, kind of the way we saw with Stalin. Unfortunately for Mao, his was totally unsuccessful. Uh, he again organizes the land into communes and again tries to promote feeding within um, the peasantry through these commune farms. 20 million people die from starvation, and believe it or not, guys, Mao actually blames this on the sparrows. And it actually causes a massive sparrow attack where people start killing sparrows later, which probably even caused more people to die because, of course, sparrows generally ate a lot of the insects. So, anyway, just really bizarre. 20 million people died in his Great Leap Forward. But again, he had solidified his power with the communist takeover after the war, and nobody is going to depose him. Now, one thing he is successful at, he creates what becomes known as the Cultural Revolution. And what he does is he actually starts targeting younger kids. And so in 66, a lot of people are starting to complain about him. So what he does, he actually indoctrinates the youth and actually labels these kids the Red Guard. And these guys actually become informants and really kind of turn in anybody who's speaking out against Mao, in particularly their parents. And so essentially what happens is if the parents were reported, they were then captured by the Chinese police essentially and taken to re-education centers. In other words, they were sent to prison camps and re-brainwashed into admitting that Mao was the greatest thing ever. Now, Mao will die in 1976, and we actually see the emergence of the new Chinese leader, Deng Xiaoping, and he'll emerge in 81. Now, what happened is Deng was actually one of the few intellectuals who actually survived the communist purges at this particular time. And so he took the country in a different direction where he wanted to institute economic reforms. And the way he did this is in the 80s, the United States got mobbed by Chinese students coming over from China, literally enrolling in a lot of different courses. Now, these kids eventually end up going back. And again, mainly because their parents were held captive, and this is typically the communist version of what they would do. They would essentially hold the parents hostage or the family hostage and tell them if they don't return when they're supposed to, they'll die or be executed, thrown in prison, whatever. Now, what happened when the kids come back, though, they have been indoctrinated in capitalist thinking. And so what happens is Deng's plan kind of actually backfires. When the students come back, they also not only want the economic reforms, but they want political reform. And they want to actually have a voice and power in speaking. Okay? This actually led to the massive demonstration known as the 1989 Tiananmen Square. What happened is the Chinese government will eventually crush this, but because communism the control of media, the control of foreign reporters coming into the country. We don't know exactly how many people actually died as a result of this. We do know, though, that at least a few thousand definitely died, and some numbers have been as high as millions as a result of the Tiananmen Square incident.